Hey friends, I've been thinking a lot about the stories we tell ourselves. Not the stories we tell other people, but the private ones. The ones that are just kind of running in the background of our minds. Like, man, can I really do that? Oh, I'm too old for that. Or I should have started this a lot sooner. How about, I've never been good at things like this. What would people think? There's one. What are my friends going to think? What's my husband going to think? What are all those people out on social media? What are they going to think? And sometimes we have repeated thoughts, those negative thoughts, for so long that we no longer recognize them as thoughts, right? We just assume they're facts. So there was an experiment done. It's kind of an interesting experiment, I think, done in an elementary school. And researchers gave the students a test, and then they told the teachers that certain children were expected to really have an intellectual growth spurt that year. So basically, they said to the teachers, keep an eye on these kids. You need to watch these ones. But actually, the children had just been chosen at random. So there was nothing in the test results showing that any one child had more ability than the other. Okay. So the only thing that really changed was the teacher's expectation. And by the end of the year, some of those students had made greater progress. It wasn't magic. The teachers didn't suddenly make them smarter. But, maybe they treated them a little bit differently. Maybe they waited a little bit longer for an answer. Maybe when the student was struggling, they thought, she's going to get it, instead of, she can't do this. Let me just go on to the next student. They looked at those children as if growth were really possible. And apparently that mattered. So that story made me wonder, what happens when nobody expects us to grow anymore? Or maybe the bigger question is, what happens when we stop expecting it? Stop expecting it from ourselves. Because at some point, we can become our own discouraging teacher. We try something once, it feels awkward, we decide, that's it, I'm not trying it anymore. The end of story. I know I've done that, and you probably have too. And we can be especially hard on ourselves as we get older. We seem to think that by 50 or 60, we should already know how to do everything. Why? Why? If a child were learning to read and stumbled over one word, we wouldn't grab the book and say, well, reading obviously isn't for you. We would smile and say, try that one again. But when we do things like trying to make a video, starting a business, learning new technology, taking fitness classes, I've seen that one quite a bit. They come to one class and they can't quite do the moves or whatever, and they don't come back. Instead of just giving themselves time. Or maybe walk into a room where we don't know anybody. Now, I have done this before. And if it doesn't go well immediately, we say, I gotta go. I must be too old for this. Not the right person for this. But maybe we're not too old. Maybe we're just new. There's a story in the Bible that reminds me of this. When God called Gideon, Gideon was not standing confidently in front of an army. He was hiding, right? And when the angel called him a mighty warrior, Gideon basically responded, who, me? He started listing all the reasons God must have chosen the wrong person. His family was weak. He was the least in his family. He didn't see himself as brave, powerful, or capable, did he? And honestly, I appreciate that about Gideon because sometimes Bible stories can make people sound fearless from the beginning. But Gideon wasn't. He questioned. He asked for reassurance. When God told him to tear down his father's altar to Baal, Gideon did it at night because he was afraid. But he did it. That's the part that matters, right? He didn't wait until all the fear disappeared. He took the step he could take with courage. The courage that he had at the time. Later, this same man who'd been hiding led 300 men. And if you know the story, they whittled it down to just 300 men against the Midianites. And they helped free Israel from oppression. He didn't wake up one morning as a completely different person. He became the leader through a series of steps. God saw something in Gideon before Gideon could see it himself. I know you teachers identify with that. I mean, I see that. You can see it in people before they can see it in themselves. And I wonder how often that is true for us. We look at ourselves and see the fear, the mistakes, the unfinished parts, and all the things we haven't figured out yet. God may be looking at the same woman and see who she is becoming. I had to work through some of this when I wrote The Adventure Never Stops. It would have been easy to say, maybe I should have written this years ago when I was younger and could concentrate better. I don't know. I could look around and see younger people writing books, building platforms, and doing things I'm only beginning to learn, right? There might have been a few moments when I wondered about that stuff. But then another thought came to me. What if I couldn't have written this book years ago? I hadn't lived it yet. I needed the nursing experience. I needed the caregiving seasons. I needed to watch people walk through aging, illness, grief, change, and new beginnings. I even needed some of the mistakes I would rather have not made. Those years weren't keeping me from the book. They were giving me the book. And that changed the way I looked at where I was. Maybe I wasn't late. Maybe I've been gathering stories, wisdom, and experience for a season I couldn't see yet. And that may be true for you too. Maybe something you went through taught you how to sit with another person in her pain. Maybe a job you thought was ordinary was teaching you how to lead. Maybe something that didn't work out redirected you towards something better. Not this. I got something better for you, daughter. We don't always know what God is doing with the pieces while we're living through them. Romans 12:2 talks about being transformed by the renewing of our minds. I don't think that means we paste a positive saying over every difficult thing, because sometimes life is just hard, right? Sometimes we are tired, and sometimes we need help. But we can be honest about whatever is hard without deciding that nothing can ever change. This is difficult is not the same as I can't do it. I'm nervous is not the same as I shouldn't go. I'm beginning later than I expected is not the same as I'm too late. So maybe the question isn't, do I feel completely ready? Gideon certainly didn't. Maybe the question is, what is the next step I can take? Not all 20 steps, just the next one. Maybe you make the phone call. Maybe you sign up for the class. Maybe you write the first paragraph. Maybe you finally say out loud that there is something you still want to do. And maybe instead of deciding how the story ends before you even begin, you become curious about what God might still do with your yes. You may not see everything in yourself yet. That doesn't mean it isn't there. You're still learning, you're still becoming, and there may be more ahead of you than you've ever allowed yourself to imagine, because the adventure never stops.